All right, welcome everyone. Just as a reminder, please stay on mute for the duration of this call. We are going to have a lot of people joining us, so it's important that we don't have any distractions. Thank you so much. All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Check. I am the chair of the Veterans and Military Families Committee and one of your moderators this evening. Whether you're here as a member of our Hispanic and Latino Committee, our Veterans and Military Families Committee, a state party member, or a non-Forward affiliated observer, I am pleased to welcome you to our second Forward Voices event on ICE and the rule of law. As most of you likely know, many of our cities have been in turmoil for the past few months as the nation grapples with its understanding of how federal law enforcement can intercede in our daily lives. Across the political spectrum, Americans have been shocked and concerned over the use of force against citizens and non-citizens alike, as well as the seemingly blatant disregard for due process and accountability, and serious concerns on government overreach. Our Veterans Committee and Hispanic and Latino Committee decided that a topic as serious and important as this deserves our attention, and a Forward Voices event focused on education and civic reform was the right way to go about it. So that being said, here's a little brief overview about what Forward Voices is. We are a collaborative educational initiative in collaboration with national committees and state party leaders. We highlight civic reform, community engagement, and the work happening across the Forward movement. All right, more on the event later, but first we're going to run through some quick introductions. I already introduced myself, and joining me today are Colin, the Vice Chair of the Veterans and Military Families Committee, and Oliver, the Chair of the Hispanic and Latino Committee. Oliver, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Oliver, and I'm in the Hispanic and Latino Committee, and our focus is very much focused on what's going on with ICE right now. I am very happy that Sarah was able to organize this because I think in this time more than ever, it's important for everybody to be aware of their rights. And that's one of the things, many of the things that we're going to be covering today. So I'll hand it over back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone. Now, before we move further into our event, I would like to turn everyone's attention momentarily to the screen. The Veteran and Military Family Committee couldn't, in good faith, host an event on a different topic without honoring the lives lost this past week overseas. The 7 soldiers in front of you lost their lives in service of our country, and I would like to ask everyone to participate in a moment of silence to honor their sacrifice before we begin our event. Please keep your mic muted for the next minute or so. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I'd like to turn the floor back over to Oliver as he explains a little bit about the Forward Party and our values this evening.
Thanks, Sarah. So in the chat, if you guys can react, just a thumbs up or fire symbol. Anybody who's frustrated with our current two-party system. Let's just hear from the crowd. How frustrated are we? So I see thumbs up. Okay, that's very good. That's why I joined Forward. I joined Forward about a year ago because I was just fundamentally frustrated with the way our government works. And to me, it always seems silly that in a democracy, we only have two options that at the end of the day seem very similar. So when Forward was founded, there was a couple of things that were kept in mind. Number one, is the rule of law and respect for the Constitution. Our nation was founded on a document that, shockingly, after 250 or so years, still really holds up. And more every day, it seems like we're slipping from those tenets that were set by that document. Number two, it's to support and strengthen democracy. The people are the ones who are in charge. It's a government for, by the people, right? And it seems increasingly that like it's more run by the interests of billionaires and people who don't necessarily have the better interests of all of America. And our party was founded on the idea that democracy is the only way to really move forward. And number three, it's American leadership. We believe that the world is at its best when America has a leading role in it. And that's not as an oppressor or as an aggressor, but as truly as a leader who champions the values that we all cherish here at home, which is democracy and liberty for all. Number four, let's go to number four, is to build from the bottom up. And that's those grassroots movement. That means that every single person who is in this call right now, we believe is a vital member of our society and deserves to have their voice heard. And that's why after this call, we're going to encourage you guys to all join. And number five, it's to use data. We live in an era of incredible technology, and we think that political movements need to be smarter. And if we're smarter, we'll be more effective. And, and the other two values are that we value innovation and entrepreneurship. And, mostly in the United States, when you hear innovation and entrepreneurship, you hear that in the private sector. But we believe that a lot of those innovations can really play a vital role in the public sector and in civic life. And at the end of the day, the most important thing, it's individual liberty, personal responsibility, and civic engagement. We are all equal members of this democracy, and it takes all of us to make a great nation. And that's why we're so excited to have each and every single one of you on this call today. And with that, I'll hand it over back to Sarah.
Thank you, Oliver, so much. All right, so just a couple of quick rules of engagement for everyone here on your screen. As I mentioned earlier, this meeting is being recorded. Please remain on mute, but the chat will be enabled for participant engagement. Also, please send any questions you have using the Q&A tool. This will allow us to read and respond to the questions and track them as well. And we will be having a Q&A portion after our speakers. And lastly, of course, respect and civility are expected throughout the meeting, in the chat, in your questions, etc. All right, so now we are going to be moving into welcoming our speakers for the evening. So I would like them to join us. Let me quickly bring them over to the front. Give me one moment. Hello, Kevin. Just so everyone knows, Kevin Shin is a city council member in Carlsbad, California. He is also a Marine Corps veteran and business owner. Kevin, I would love it for you to say a few words of introduction.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So, yeah, I'm a retired fire captain, not chief, but thanks for promoting me. And Semper Fi, all of you guys who are in the Corps, and to the rest of my veterans, just love you guys to death. Big reason why I stayed in Carlsbad was just because of the kind of the veteran presence I have there. What I love is first that I randomly bumped into Sarah when I was attempting to run for office, and she introduced me to the Forward Party. And at that time, I had just jumped into a party that, and prior to that, I had never been. I was a guy who just said, I'm an operator. I'm here to serve whoever the president is the Marine Corps, or the fire department, what have you. So jumping in, I really never saw what the party processes look like. And then I'm in it now, and I'm so happy to be here in this Zoom meeting. I'm a strong believer in leadership principles, and I really feel like that a lot of times the tail is wagging the dog in these parties, and it's not really allowing for breathing room to allow leadership to lead the way through things. So I think you guys are creating an outstanding environment for that, to allow civil discourse to take place and to really be able to discuss the issues and know that there could be two sides of the coin, and there's not just one way of doing it. So just honored to be here.
Thank you so much, Kevin. All right, go ahead, Albert.
And just like Kevin, we have another awesome guy, Paul Pickett Acevedo. And a little bit about Paul. He's a U.S. Air Force Reserve veteran. He's an educator and trainer, and he's pretty much the pride of Murray City, Utah. And with that, Paul, why don't you take a little chance to share a little bit about yourself?
That's very kind. Yes, my name is Paul Pickett Acevedo, or Roberto Paul Pickett Acevedo. Born and raised in Argentina. I moved to the U.S. I've gone through the whole process of moving to the U.S. and discovering life in the USA. I became discontent with politics about 15 years ago when my party kept drifting further to the right than I was comfortable with. Unfortunately, I live in Utah, as a state that requires you to be affiliated with a party to vote in the primary. So most of Utah is registered Republican because the winner of the Republican primary wins the general election. So I am a registered Republican, but I discovered the Forward Party last fall. I attended their convention here in Salt Lake. I really liked what it stood for. I got this wonderful, cool pin from them for the Forward Party. I'm excited to wear that pin and to guide people who would like to join a third party to join the Forward Party. I'm excited for today's talk and speak and be able to share some things and my experiences as an immigrant here in Utah, and be able to hear from Kevin also on what's happening with our veterans. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, so we are going to allow our wonderful council members the opportunity to share with us. So I will stop presenting. And Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's probably two directions like I would like to probably speak about in regards to what's been taking place. One is if you're really thinking in a balanced, kind of a stressful situation, when I talk across the board in our city platforms, the person who has the hardest right now is our police chief, Christy Calderwood. So just to kind of lay a canvas down for you guys, you just have to imagine that a police chief has to still obey the law and enforce the law. However, there is a hierarchy in regards to law enforcement, and that's federal first, and then it works its way down locally. So she is hamstrung by what takes place, and she knows she's in this type of like constitutional crisis where she is seeing things that may take place that would be questionable, but she also has to abide by federal law. And so it puts her in a very stressful situation. And my job last time we had a council meeting in regards to this, I was just stressing the point about how effective our local law enforcement is, how professional they are, how long it takes them to train, what qualifies them to be a police officer, a law enforcement officer for our city. And that highlighting really ended up showing what's not taking place federally. So that's kind of been my first steps with this. California has enforcement tools. We have SB 54, which then allows any type of local law enforcement. They are not allowed to tell the state or feds exactly if someone is in an immigration status or not. So we get to kind of seek cover with that part. So that's one component. The other thing that took place was it's the Vet Dems party club here in San Diego. They had introduced me to a person that I saw just on TV in like the Los Angeles area by the name of George Retes. So George is a combat Army veteran, went to Iraq, and he was just trying to go to work as a security guard. And when he was on his way up there, he noticed the crowds were there was a crowd. He didn't even know what was going on. Then he realized it was a wall of ICE agents. They ended up trying to force him to pull over and park. He complied. He complied the entire time. And when the buses were already passing through this farm that he was supposed to be doing security with, they broke into his car, they yanked him out, and they detained him. The thing that shook me the most was that they detained him for 3 days and 3 nights. They didn't allow him to make a phone call out, and the family didn't know where he was. And so that right then and there, I'm like, all right, we're dealing with, in my opinion, not only a constitutional violation that impacted any citizen if this happened to them, but then again, on were stacking it on to someone who had defended the Constitution with their lives. So he was asking for help, and at that time there was no one really supporting him. So I just kind of made as many bridgeways as I could with him. I'm still supporting him, of course. And the one thing that the constitutional attorney, Anya, had highlighted the most about this is that there's a weird one. So check this out. It's called Title 42, Section 1983. And if someone's able to put that in the chat, what this was called the Ku Klux Klan Act. So what ended up happening was during Reconstruction era, the slaves were trying to settle back into their areas, and especially in the southern states, they realized that state and local officials and law enforcement were doing things unconstitutional. So they passed this section, 1983, but the unfortunate side is that they forgot to put the word in federal. And so what that means is ever since back then all the way to now, if there's a federal offense, a constitutional violation, federal offense, it will make its way to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court decides whether or not they will be able to seek trial for it. And so ever since post 9/11, I'll take a step back. In 1971, it got strengthened by a case called Bivens versus 6 unarmed agents. And it realized through the courts, they said, hey, there's due process. We will allow more of these cases to take place. Then move forward to 9/11, and post 9/11, we were dealing with those that could be foreign or domestic. And when we started detaining people the way we did post 9/11, they started hitting the gavel and saying, you know, just court dismissed. This doesn't need to see trial. That's essentially the tool that's been taking place since Trump's come into office. That's the power he knows he has. And so it's a really strange one right now, because every time I advocate for this reform, which Congressman Hank Aaron's teed it up to just add the word federal in, I don't get pushback, but I get like a mute. And I almost feel like it's either an opportunity where federal electeds don't really want to see this thing be added, because then it would drop a lot more cases federally in court, and they either don't want to have to deal with it, but there's something that's going on where this doesn't get advocated that much. And so I've been slowly trying to ramp it up. George is doing what he can do. He filed a tort claim that was a 6-month opportunity for DHS to come back and say, hey, here's a response. They never gave him a response. And now he's finally in the first district courts in order to seek trial. They will probably use 1983 as a reason to hit the gavel and say no. And then it'll go up to the Ninth Circuit and then the Supreme Court. So this is a component that it seems like both parties don't want to tackle. And I've reached out to Sarah about this and seeing if there's some way we can start advocating or at least highlighting Section 1983 and realizing that we're providing immunity towards federal law enforcement officers that local and state law enforcement officers don't have. They don't have this immunity. And it basically makes them essentially above the law if they so choose. So those are the two things I'm focused on right now. If there's, I think you're doing Q&A later. Is that right, Sarah?
Correct, yeah.
So yeah, when you guys want to talk about that, we can, and I'll leave the floor to Mr. Pickett.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. Take it away, Paul.
There we go. I can work the mute button very well. Thank you. No, I just want to talk a little bit about our experience with ICE in Utah. Murray City is along the Wasatch Front. It is a suburb of Salt Lake City, Utah. It is the Salt Lake Valley, and there are about 16 municipalities that compose the valley. So we're one of 16 municipalities, and we're all just tied together. Just, you cross one street, you're in a different city type of thing. But let me just tell you a little bit about my experience in the last 2 years. I was elected in 2023. I ran simply because my representative was not doing anything to represent anybody but herself. And it resonated with my neighbors, so I ran. Even though I'm not originally from Murray, I'm not even from the United States, but people thought that I was going to do a good enough job that they voted for me. There's a tactic being used where the government is stereotyping and tapping into a fear that people have about people who are not like them. And when people are struck by something that scares them, their mind immediately goes into the fight or flight stage. And I believe there's a third stage it also goes into, and that is the freeze stage. That means we're immobilized by our inability to know what to do. And I just want to talk about that a little bit, because when we stereotype and create that stereotype and we do a negative stereotype of people, that affects many people's lives. Let me tell you my experience with stereotypes, and it's kind of a funny one. When I moved to the United States, my dad chose a small town in Idaho to move to. It's a tiny town of about 2,000 people. And here we are, a family from Argentina. None of us but my mom and dad speak really good English. The younger ones, we kind of knew some phrases and we could get by. But we moved to Rigby, Idaho, and we set up shop there. My first day of school in the 6th grade, my teacher brings me to the front of the class and wants me to introduce myself to the class in whatever broken English I could. I mean, this guy is a nice local dairy farmer. He probably taught to keep this dairy farm open because I think he liked his cows more than people, but he's a nice guy. But that stereotyping was his only experience of how to deal with outside influences. So I'm standing up there in my broken English. I say, I'm Paul Pickett Acevedo. I'm from Tucumán, Argentina. And he stops me and taps me on the shoulder and goes, "Where was that?" And I said, "Tucumán, Argentina." And he says, "How far is that from Tijuana?" And I looked at him and it's like, I have no idea what he's talking about, right? But to him, Hispanic meant Mexican. And to him, the nearest port of entry to Mexico was Tijuana. So he figured everybody went through Tijuana, right? And so right now it's comical to think about it, but that really is a stereotype and an assumption that's still alive today. When our current president ran for office in 2016, he used that stereotyping to infiltrate fear into the people. We watch cop shows, and who are the bad guys in the big cities? Oh, the Hispanics with the what's it called? Those I don't want to use that street name for it. The tank tops, we'll say that, and the bandanas and the baggy pants and the lowriders, right? That's the Hispanics, the cholos that come in to shoot you up or to sell drugs. And he sold that stereotype to people so well that people went into that fight or flight mode or freeze mode. And we see him using that with ICE right now. The ICE raids that have been occurring all over the country, they're different than they used to be in the past. When I lived up in Idaho, I used to do translation for the sheriff's department and ICE sometimes, and they would just raid, like a warehouse. It would be more like a workplace audit type of raid. But the current ICE raids, I mean, they have a significant increased number of agents. Before it was like 2 or 3 going to a warehouse. Now you see dozens going into one place, kind of an aggressive approach. They use all kinds of strong hand tactics to intimidate the people there. And all of this is really unprecedented, but I think it's doing it to tap into the fear of the people. Here in Murray, we've seen them come and they know that Murray won't cooperate with them directly. We made that very clear that we will do what's required of us to do. So what they've started doing is when they come and do a stop or a raid, they will call 911 and report an aggressive individual attacking them. And so our police has to respond to those aggressive, attacks on federal agents. And of course they get there and all they get is the 12 agents surrounding them saying, this guy did this guy did that. So our police, arrest the person and takes them out. But in reality, we go back and look at the video, at the footage of the body cams, and it doesn't always pay out the way it is. And so this makes it very difficult for a municipality that has to cooperate with the federal government when the federal government through ICE is actually lying to us. And so there's a widespread fear among the Hispanic community here in Utah. Now, we haven't seen the levels of violence that you guys have seen in LA or in Minneapolis, and we pray for you guys. But I attend a church here that's Spanish-speaking people from Latin America, about 13 different countries, and they have been in terror and fear this last year. Our church attendance has dropped about 13%. They're still here. They just don't want to come to a place where all Hispanics are gathered together for fear that they're going to be raided by ICE while they're trying to worship. And so we see people that won't even go grocery shopping. So we set up a system at church that those who have their legal papers here will help the others who are afraid to go out, and they'll actually go do some of their shopping for them, or they'll have groceries delivered to their home because they're too afraid to leave their home. My wife works at a local elementary school. She speaks Spanish also. She's from Carlsbad, California. I don't know if I told you that, Kevin. She's a teacher assistant working with the migrant population there. And this school year, they saw a drop of over 20% in attendance from Hispanic students. They haven't moved away. They're just not coming to school because of fear of immigration. And I'm thinking about that. This is a whole swath of people, children who are not being developed right now because of the fear that's going on there. But let me tell you the story of one individual. This individual, I taught his brother and his sister in the 22 years I taught in high school. I didn't teach this young man, who's an older man now. His name is Jair Celis, and he's in the news. You can look up his story here. But the family came here legally. The family set themselves up here, and their dad had a contract of job here. After the contract ended, they liked the place well enough that they stayed here with expired documents. Eventually, the kids got older and each followed their own path. But Jair married a local girl. Jair married a local American girl and decided to get himself legal. And the process took years. They had a child, they had a second child. And this last December, finally, he got his final appointment to go get his green card. You know, that final one where they just kind of go through, make sure your papers are all in order. They sign it. He walks out of there with, the promise of the arrival of a green card. While he's in the immigration office here in Salt Lake City, about 15 blocks from my house here, ICE comes into the immigration office. They go into every interview room, including the one where Jair is, and they tell his wife, we need you to go to this room, and Mr. Jair, we need you to go to that room. Well, they're following instructions, right? They're on their last visit. Jair goes into the next room. He walks in there. He's immediately thrown to the ground and handcuffed and dragged out of there, put in the van, and driven away. Meanwhile, his wife is waiting in the other room. She waited a couple of hours, and finally, she just comes out and goes, what's going on? Nobody's talked to me. And they said, oh, your husband's here illegally. He's now been arrested, and we're going to deport him. And of course, she's like, we just came here. We're doing everything legally. Everything he asked us to do the right way. We're here for our last visit. Literally an hour from now, he could be walking out with this green card. And you arrest him? They said, yep, because today when he walked in, he wasn't here in the country legally. 2 or 3 days go by before they find out where he is. They took him to Las Vegas. They didn't keep him here. They bussed him 6 hours away, and they held him there without a phone call, without anything for 3 days. After 3 days, he finally was able to contact and say, I'm in Las Vegas. So they have to get a new attorney who now practices in Nevada and be able to get him out. Thousands and thousands of dollars simply because they just felt like doing that, planting fear in the people. And the story ran headline here in Utah. And every immigrant who saw that, they were saying, wait a minute, I'm in process too. I'm not going to go to my meeting. They're going to arrest me. And guess what happens? You don't go to your meeting, you have to start all over again, all your paperwork. So as a city councilman, I get text messages. They stop me at the grocery store. They're asking the same thing. They're saying, we oppose what's going on with Trump and ICE and everything he's doing, but what can we do? We feel so powerless. We have the freeze, right? So I don't know what to tell them at that point. I mean, I just simply give them some generic advice like, well, if you see something happening, document it, audio, video, just don't get in the way, because you know what happens when you get in the way, right? You can't even have your First Amendment anymore. We learned you can't have your Second Amendment. Your Fourth Amendment, it's now being infringed on. Our Constitution is being trampled by these ICE agents. So a couple of municipalities in the Valley joined the ICE 287G program. I don't know if you know what that means. It's a program where they sign an agreement where their police officers are deputized as ICE agents. We as a city made it very clear we're not going to join the 287G program, even though there's a little bit of pressure from the Republican Party to do that. We tell them we're not joining it. Maybe contact your city, make sure they're not joining that, and always remain vocal and support the due process and the constitutional rights, right? We're living in a time of unprecedented attacks on our Constitution. We understand that ICE has a job to do, and we support the enforcement of the law, but what we don't support is the dehumanizing of immigrants. What we don't support is the suspension of the First, Second, Fourth, 10th, 14th Amendments. What we don't support is the target of individuals who have not committed crime. What we don't support is the invasion by ICE forces in specific communities, targeting people like that. That's what we don't support. So I encourage you, take a strong stance against tyranny. This is tyranny. Stand strong with the Constitution of the United States. Stand strong for the respect of human rights, and stand strong for the rights and dignity of the victims of ICE. And that's what I tell them. That's what we have to do. So I hope that this inspires you out there to keep working and keep standing up for the thing that's right. That's why we have a Constitution. And that's why I have a hard time with the Republican Party right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate that. I think that's another great point of why this event, even we are co-hosting the Veterans and Military Families and the Hispanic and Latino Committee, and why we're working so hard to work together, because this is not just one community that's being affected. It's all of us. And it's so important that we participate in these kind of events together, and then we walk away with a stronger sense of community and an understanding of what we can do. So without further ado, let's move into our Q&A portion. I also want to remind everyone again to please submit questions using the Q&A tool. I have a couple queued up here. If there are any questions that are legal in nature, please feel free to also submit those, because I have an attorney from the Institute of Justice that will be providing legal-based questions or answers to our questions. You can also send those to our committee email, which is on the screen. So I have a couple questions here. Let me pull them up. All right, first question is for Mr. Pickett. How can we work as an organization to fight these stereotypes that saturate our society?
Thank you so much. What a great question. We need to expose people to the good side of every culture, every society. Anything you can do to invite Hispanic leaders to your churches, to your any type of activity where people can see that we are just like you are. We have the same needs, desires, loves, wants. We love the USA. We might have brown skin and not look like, blonde, blue-eyed person, but we love the US. We love the Constitution. That's the reason we are here. And the more we can present, intermingle, introduce people, and let them work together, the better it's going to be. I had an event about 3 weeks ago in our townhouse. Well, we call it the townhouse. It's kind of a place where people gather for big events, where I got out of the car and I was speaking Spanish to my wife, and a guy turns to me and said, "Hey, it's English here." I looked at him, I was like, whatever, locked the door, walked in. I come back out from the event an hour later, the whole side of my car is keyed. The guy just took his key and ran it along there. And I just think, that man is ignorant. He's not doing it because he hates me. He's doing it because he's not been exposed to a good experience with Hispanic people. I need to show people that we are like you. We are like everybody else. And that's what I would say.
Thank you for that story, Paul. Also, Kevin, I want to give you the opportunity to answer that question as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Paul just nailed it, but I would say, I will say a couple things, right? So and this isn't just one community or the other. When I was not in a party and I joined the Democratic Party, the October 7th massacre occurred, right? So now you're dealing with two cultures that are adamantly opposed to each other. And at that time, the Democratic Party had asked me to choose which side I was going to be on. And that's where you have to take a big pause back. And you have to really realize that, there's a sense, I literally just posted this morning. So there literally is a sense of identifying yourself as a tribe, right? We all just do it. It's human nature. We're proud of who we are. Then there's the other side of it where there are some people who feel like because you're in a tribe that the other ones are, for some reason, the enemy. For some reasons, you have to do something to attack. And this might just be like the roots of who we are as humans is one thing, but to really level up and to really be able to use the fabric of America, we all know what it means. I know this whole room does, but citing examples of how to be able to immerse ourselves with these other cultures is the biggest key. How do you do that? I personally think it's exactly what Paul said. I'll just reinforce it, meaning that showing the best sides of your culture, whatever it is, even if you're European and white and you're from middle Iowa and that's your culture, that's great. It's just how you do the approach to the other side. That's what you have to really say. This is the best of what I've got. And we all as humans have a very ugly side to us. Everyone who's a veteran understands, and I try to say this too, when people try to only praise veterans, we have another side of us. We're lethal killers. Our job is to eliminate and destroy. And so there is a side of us that we don't always want to bring up as well, but we bring the best sides forward. Our uniforms are polished and the way we conduct ourselves with our character and integrity are high for another side of a reason. It's because essentially the fabric of our Constitution. So, that all being said, this is what's beautiful about the Forward Party, is that you don't just choose a side and you don't just say, okay, anything you say, I'm now totally against. We're watching, it's just too trigger happy. And so what we really have to understand is that for every group, every human, there are complexities to all of this. And we just have to focus on like the one word I'm really just trying to get out there is the word tolerance. We have to accept that other people are different, and we have to try to find the things that make us common to them and the reasons why we both have a heart. And I think that's the only path to move forward.
No pun intended. Thank you for that answer. All right. This next question is from Julie Lopez. This is for you, Kevin. She says, I'm a member of the legislative committee in the Maryland Forward Party. Is there a way we can support your efforts of modifying the language in Title 42? Or are there any other legislative initiatives dealing with rule of law and or respect for the Constitution that we could help with? I will also submit this question, Julie, to our lawyer, but Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah. So here's been a couple of the quagmires. One is that federal laws are boring. Okay. So, I mean, the Constitution is great when you read it, but the federal law and code of this is very boring. And I've even tried to find ways to brand how 1983 can be an exciting thing to read, learn, understand, and change. It's still a quest, right? It's been taking me dang near a year. I try to say 1983 is like 1987 if you guys have read the book, but even still, it's hard to get to the normal human being to understand that. So I would push what Hank Johnson has teed up, get an understanding of what he's trying to do, learn more about the story of what 1983 is, and then understand George's story. He's pretty much like there's so many wrongs that took place during his detainment. His child had turned 3 during those 3 days, and he missed out on his daughter's birthday. There's just a whole series of events. You couldn't even make this story up. That's one side of it. And then I think the other side, this is kind of a sidebar, is that we really have to identify to the people who are, let's say, on the hard right, that 1983 affected them too. There's case law, and Ani will tee it up and she may be able to clarify when you get back to her. There's case laws where ATF came in and raided a person's home because they thought they had illegal weapons, and they went in the middle of the night and stormed it, and he just thought that was an intruder, so he came out with his weapon and they shot him dead. And so, you know, there is an argument for both sides about why 1983 is a little bit over the top. So just learn it. If you can figure out how to package this thing better than I've been trying, like, please bring it. And maybe this is a good rallying cry for the Forward Party, where this doesn't affect just one side or the other. It's just a immunity that should not be taking place with federal law enforcement.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm also going to have, just so everyone on this session understands, I'm going to have our lawyer explain what federal immunity is, just to give a little bit of an understanding for background, because that's something that I certainly didn't know as someone with no understanding of the law in that regard. All right, this next question is from Brett Pruitt. This is to you, Paul. Has Mr. Pickett's town considered prosecuting the ICE agents for filing false reports to their local PD? That's the kind of action that he is looking for.
We looked at, I asked the police chief to look at the video, and unfortunately what happened before we got there wasn't on the video. It was only a secondhand testimony that the agent started pushing this man around, and then he pushed back. And the only part that was on the video was him pushing back. I think there's a tactic of not turning on the body camera until after they've antagonized the individual and the individual snaps back at them. So all we have is an individual attacking federal officers. There's a witness that said that the officers were pushing him around before, but he's not willing to testify for fear because he's Hispanic. So we can't do anything about that right now, unfortunately.
Thank you for that answer. I wanted to ask, Kevin, can you give a brief explanation of what qualified immunity is? If not, I'll just have it explained in the post email, but I wanted to know if you'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways of expressing immunity. So qualified immunity, if you think about it, for police, and I'll use my perspective as fire, so you guys don't get too hyped up in regards to the law enforcement side. But think about if I get a call as a fire captain because someone says that they saw smoke in their neighbor's house, or they haven't seen their neighbor outside in a while. Can you do a welfare check? And if I go and I take a peek through the window and I see smoke, or I can't tell, or if I see like feet, on the floor lying down, I have qualified immunity to then go in there and kind of do a breaking and entering, right? So if anyone else were to do it, it'd be breaking and entering. But for me, it's qualified immunity for me to be able to go in there and see what's going on. And it's based off of any of sound reason you guys would all believe as the public that that's the right thing for me to do as a part of public safety. So there's that qualified immunity is where law enforcement typically can do things. They have the right to detain you for that moment, even though if I were to try to detain someone, it would be kidnapping. So that works out fine. It's just the fact that the immunity gets all the way up to the federal side. And once it gets to the federal side, it's just completely inert. It means nothing. It's beyond immunity. It's to the point where I think it's called sovereign immunity, where essentially you can just do as you will. You can kill without any due regard or reason for it.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is why George's case is so important, because it is challenging qualified immunity. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but should it go to the Ninth Circuit Court and then the Supreme Court, it is possibility for qualified immunity to be a little bit less immune to all officers.
Yeah, so 1983 was set up so that local and state law enforcement officers and officials, so like Paul and myself, if we were to do something that was unconstitutional, that the courts will say, as soon as you get to that first level of the first district courts, they would just say, okay, yeah, this is a case, like, let's open it up, let's see. everything, which is what they call discovery, right? So meaning that all these things that they want to ask about what happened inside the cells and how come he was not able to use a phone. What was the whole reason of his arrest? So his arrest was called, he was detained pursuant to arrest. And so if you had Ani here, she would light you up right now, the attorney, which basically means he was arrested for being arrested. It makes as much sense to you as it does to me for saying something like that. So they released him without charging him. So now think about that. They made someone go dark for 3 days who's a United States citizen, right? And if the Supreme Court hits the gavel and says, based off of 1983, these guys are immune to this, and they hit the gavel and they say case dismissed and you can't get any of this discovery, it sets precedents right then and there that now ICE and federal law enforcement officers can disappear you. That's it. And it's not just 3 days. It's just that they can disappear you. And now we're in a whole nother world if that's acceptable, right? So that's why this section in this federal code is being so highlighted when it comes to constitutional attorneys. But for some reason, I can't get this thing to get amplified to just the general public to understand, like, okay, like even at left or right, like, could you imagine if the left gets so set up to the majority and let's say the wrong people want to do revenge? I try to explain this to my friends on the right. I say, just imagine right now if a hard left people show up and they say, anyone wearing a red ball cap are suspect to terrorists, and you need to disappear these people. They are not Americans. Just imagine. I mean, it sounds crazy, but we're already listening. We're in a world of crazy already. So this is just, it's driving me wild. Okay, sorry, I'm venting.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks, Sarah. As I'm monitoring the chat and the Q&A for this event, I just, as the moderator, want to step in and clarify something. Kevin mentioned this at the top of his remarks, and I think we're just mixing a little bit of terminology. And so for clarity, I wanted to get us back to where you started, Kevin, which is 28 U.S.C. Section 1983 is a statute of the Federal Judiciary Code that allows private lawsuits against government officials at any level. And you mentioned the Bivens case, which is the case that in theory extended 1983 liability to federal officials, though they're not explicitly mentioned in the statute. And how that operates is you, a private citizen, bring a lawsuit against any official, a state official, a local official, a federal official. And what happens next is that official is entitled to assert certain defenses at stages of the lawsuit. Qualified immunity is one of the defenses that those government officials can assert in those litigations. And one of the things that goes around with when we talk about qualified immunity is whether or not that individual is violating a clearly established law. What judges have done, as we talk about the way that courts have potentially overstepped their authority, is come up with doctrines that protect officials outside of what Section 1983 was originally intended to do. Section 1983 was part of the reconstruction of the United States following the Civil War and entitled these kinds of civil rights suits to come about in the wake of, preventing segregation and that sort of thing, to allow people to protect their own civil rights under the 14th Amendment. And so the courts have crafted ways for government officials to get around these suits by asserting what we call qualified immunity. And I think what Kevin is talking about, and to kind of bring the conversation back, is the idea of how do we limit qualified immunity to allow suits in these kinds of what we're all here on this call thinking of as extreme circumstances that still allow officers to evade liability. And so, it's not that federal officers are always immune. It's that federal officers are immune in certain circumstances. And I think everybody on this call would suggest that the examples that we've been given today are circumstances where federal officers should face some kind of liability. So just to get us sort of all on the same page about that. So
Thank you
Thanks.
so much, Colin. By the way, everyone, Colin is a lawyer and a genius. So that's,
Heck yeah.
thank
I'll
you for
take it.
that. All
But-
right. So
And just to,
go ahead, Kevin.
yeah, sorry, just to jump in on that one. It's and maybe the conversation with you, Colin, should be done with Anya, right? So if you haven't spoke together as well. And then when I spoke with Hank Johnson's team, it just seemed as though it just says state. It says state, and I think that was the part that in the laws what they used to justify it doesn't say federal. And so that's the interpretation I keep receiving from both their office and Anya's. But if there's a
That is the correct.
that.
That is what the statute says. It is specifically targeted to state and local officials. But when you mentioned the Bivens case earlier, that explains how a litigant can use what is the equivalent of a 1983 suit. We call them a Bivens suit. How that can be used against federal officials.
Gotcha.
My understanding of the intent to remove qualified immunity or significantly limit qualified immunity is to amend statutes like 1983 in certain circumstances, because for everybody's knowledge, the federal government has absolute immunity by its own nature, apart from the restrictions that are explicitly limited by the Constitution. So the things in the Bill of Rights. And the government can waive that immunity by its own decision making. I mean, that's how you get individual tort suits against the government for certain things like, plane crashes that are the government's fault and that sort of thing. Congress has to do things affirmatively to allow those lawsuits to proceed, and qualified immunity is no different. So, if the government wants to allow you to sue FBI agents or ICE agents, it can do that. And whether you do that through amending, the language in 1983 or you pass a different statute, it doesn't really matter. But whatever effort is gaining the most traction, I think we would all support, and that's a really good point. But that's the that's the method behind it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that clarification. I did want to ask both Paul and Kevin if you could just give some final words. If you were speaking to your city right now, your community, what would you tell them to allow them to take heart a little bit and allow us to work together across the aisle on this issue?
I'll jump in first, Kevin, if you don't mind. I would just simply remind them that we are being manipulated at this moment by a tyrant leader who wants us to fight, flight, or freeze. We should take the fourth option, which is we're going to stand our ground, and we're going to make sure that anything they do comes to the light, and be that person who is willing to stand up and make things come to the light. That's what I would tell them.
I have a completely different last thought that I know I need to say, and this is what's driving me absolutely, I'm just going to say it's just driving me batshit wild, is that for the past year plus that they've decided to do this, they have yet to create a proper immigration reform system of how are we going to get the right people in and out. I believe in immigration like enforcement. So I think one day that ICE should show up and do certain right things and wrong things, or not wrong, sorry, do the right things, but it needs the right policies, right? So if you're in the military, and like the way I've always seen it is that my policies and strategies will then dictate my tactics and operations. So if I'm not getting clear guidelines, I ask my colonel for it. I say, what is the purpose of why I'm going to do these tactics right now? And if they're not giving it to me, then I'm belligerent on the battlefield. And so that's what we're seeing right now, in my personal opinion. And we have yet to see the great, perfect reform or something better than what we had before from both sides. And once we get that dialed, then our agents can do the right thing, and we can be proud of these agents for then doing the right thing. We, all of us in the military have had examined what it was like to experience, for those that are older, Vietnam. And then for me, sometimes I wonder, like my time as a defense contractor, what the hell was I doing out there in the stands is what I would basically call that area, right? Like, what am I doing out here? And then for them to pull it away and watch the Taliban come in there and just upheaval the whole entire work that we've done for the past like quarter century it drives me insane that this is happening now, but now it's happening domestically. So if I were to yell, I would of course yell at exactly what Paul's been mentioning. We've been hearing it a lot, but we're also need to say, what have you been doing in your think tank this entire time? Like, you're supposed to make, if you're supposed to make America greater, where is it? Where are you going to leave us with? So I just leave it at that.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. What I take away from that is accountability and community. So with that being said, one of those things is the next on our list to talk about, which is if you want to be a part of the solution. I would recommend you join your state party, you join a national committee. I know we talked about the importance of community and getting to know people that are different from you. It sounds like such a simple thing, but as Paul mentioned, it really can help bridge a lot of these gaps. And so I really believe in what we're doing. Please join a national committee. And hey, if you don't see yourself represented on that list, start one. I'm holding you right now accountable for starting a new committee if you believe that you're not represented on that list, and we will support you in that. So thank you all so much for participating in this. As I mentioned, I will be sending out your questions with answers later on, probably at the beginning of next week. And I will try and make the recording available for those of you who participated tonight. So thank you so much to our council members. Thank you so much to our participants. You all being here really does make a difference. When you show up, listen, and participate, it changes hearts and minds. And please take solace in the fact that we're here together, and take care of yourselves. Have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.